So today we are making what possibly may be my favorite brownie of all times. And it certainly is the brownie recipe that I have made more than any other brownie recipe, and one that has literally earned me a lot of brownie points. So these brownies were definitely my son's favorite when they were teenagers, and they were their friends' favorite too. So these brownies are, if you want to get some teenagers to hang out at your house, these are the perfect thing to make. My original recipe for these brownies, the full batch version, makes a 9 by 13. So if you need more brownies other than this small batch version, check down below. But the recipe uses a cake mix. So I needed to figure out a way how to make these brownies without having to use a cake mix, so that I wasn't, wasting opening a cake mix, using a little bit of it and not using the rest. So I've done it. And I think my small batch version is just as good as the original recipe. Okay, we're gonna start with the brownie batter first, and we are going to use a half of a cup of all-purpose unbleached flour is what I prefer to use. And the way I like to measure my flour is I just kind of go in there and fluff my flour a little bit, scoop, there we go. And then I just take a knife or something with a flat edge and scrape the top. There we go. Half of a cup of flour. And then we're gonna use a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 1/8 of a cup or 2 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder. We're gonna use a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and let me double check. Is it a teaspoon? Yes, a teaspoon of baking powder. All right. And then let me grab a whisk. We're just gonna kind of fluff all this together, and this basically makes the cake mix part of the recipe. Now, the original recipe used a German chocolate cake mix, and the difference between a German chocolate cake mix and a regular cake mix is the type of cocoa you use. And I really don't find that there's a whole lot of difference of flavor, so we're just using unsweetened cocoa today and calling it good. All right, the next part, we're gonna add in some melted butter. Now, I am using salted butter. If you're using unsalted, add in a pinch more salt, but we've got 3 tablespoons of melted butter here. And then we're gonna add in 2.5 tablespoons of evaporated milk. I'm using canned milk like this. Now, if you don't have evaporated milk, you don't wanna open a can of evaporated milk, go ahead and use 1/2 and 1/2 or whipping cream. 2.5, there we go. And then we are gonna mix this together. Now, this is gonna be a very wet batter. All right, we are going to bake these brownies. I am going to use just a regular loaf pan, which I have lined with some parchment paper. And if you want to know how I've cut this parchment paper, I'm going to link to the video right up there where I show you how to do it. It works great. I really like using parchment paper. You could always spray it with a nonstick spray, but it is so much easier to remove the brownie from the pan if you use parchment paper. So we're using parchment paper today. Now, we're going to take just half of that batter, or approximately half. Err on the side of a little bit more than half if you need to. And we're just gonna take it and push it down into a thin layer in the bottom of our loaf pan. Now, don't worry if it doesn't touch all the edges. It's gonna expand as it bakes, and it'll be just great. Once we have this all on the bottom of the pan, we are going to put it in a 350-degree oven for 6 minutes, okay? We're gonna just bake this partially, and then we're gonna add the rest of the topping and other things on top. Well, while that is baking, we're gonna go ahead and mix our caramel sauce. Now, you've got a couple of options here. If you had a nice thick caramel sauce in your pantry or your refrigerator, you could use that. But what we're gonna use is some of these Kraft caramel bits. Now, I usually find these right in the baking aisle by the chocolate chips, but if you can't find them, you can use the little squares of Kraft caramels that come individually wrapped. That's what I used to use until they came out with these years ago. So we've got a 1/2 of a cup of those caramel bits. Now we're gonna put this into just a medium-sized bowl that is microwave safe, because I am gonna melt this in the microwave. If you don't have a microwave, put it in a saucepan and do it on top of the stove. And then we're also gonna add in 2 more tablespoons of our evaporated milk. Again, if you don't have evaporated milk, use whatever you used in the brownie batter. I'm gonna pop this in the microwave just like for a minute. You want this to, all the caramel to melt and incorporate with the milk. Put it in the microwave for a minute, then I pulled it out, stirred it around because they weren't quite melted. Put it back in for 30 seconds. You got all nice and bubbly, and then pulled it out again, and then just stir until those little craft bits are totally melted and incorporated. Now, if you're using the caramel squares, it may take a little bit longer because they are bigger than those caramel bits, but you want that caramel to be nice and smooth. I'll do a close-up. Out of the oven, and now we are going to take a 1/4 cup. I'm using semi-sweet chocolate chips. That's what I've always used, but if you prefer dark milk chocolate, go ahead. But a 1/4 cup, and just gently sprinkle those a nice even layer across the top. I was actually using 1/3 cup, so had a few extra there. And then we are gonna take that caramel and we're gonna just drizzle that all over the top. Then we're ready for that other half of our batter. And we're just gonna take it into little pieces and kind of flatten them with your hand. And we're gonna then just place them on top of that caramel layer. Now, you don't need to cover all of the caramel because again, this batter is gonna expand as it bakes and it will come together, but you know, try to get it covered as best you can. But I say it doesn't have to be perfect. And now we're gonna put it back in the oven, at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 12 to 15 minutes. All right, our brownies I've let them cool a little bit. This is really the hardest part of the whole thing, is waiting for them to cool a bit. And you can see here with the parchment paper how easy it is. Boom, just lift it out like that. And these are still a little soft, but you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and cut into them. I generally like to cut these into 4 or 8. These are pretty rich, so you can get away with cutting them a little bit smaller and people will still be happy. But I'm gonna show you, if I can, they're not too soft, how ooey and gooey they are. You can just see they're so gooey. You can see that caramel coming out there. Yeah, I'll do a close-up so you can see. They are so good, and you will know why these are totally the favorite of everybody that I have made them for. So I hope you enjoyed this small batch version of caramel brownies. Again, if you need a full batch, because this just isn't enough, check down below. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. I've got new small batch recipes coming out every week, and I'll see you in the next video.